Welcome to this reaction video.
Can you guess the country by its 15 biggest cities? It will keep getting harder the further you go. So this is basically an example. This looks already pretty difficult. This is Germany's 15 biggest cities. You just have to guess without even the shape or the borders of the country. So here's the first question. This one is supposed to be pretty easy, and I believe it is. This is definitely Australia. Obviously, the vast majority of Australians live in this southeastern corner here. There's a giant desert, and then there's kind of just like Perth and a couple others over this way. Number 2 looks a bit harder, but if I had to make a guess, I'm thinking it's Chile. And honestly, that is because they've given me a very long rectangle. I would have said Egypt, but Egypt's gonna look more like a windy tree, especially because a large portion of people live up this way. By the way, just confirm those first 2 we got correct. This one definitely looks like a Norway, and it looks like I can confirm number 3 is Norway. This is definitely a Japan. I can kind of see the shape, but also this is clearly Tokyo. Tokyo is just a huge city, which I think it's actually classified as multiple cities here. I don't know about this one. Wait a second. If the empty space is at the top, that means more than likely this country is like really towards that North Pole. If there's nobody living all the way up here, then that means this is probably all tundra. That means this is definitely Canada. And there we go. Okay, well, now we have kind of a system here. Okay, well, I don't know what to do about this. I believe this is Russia because nobody lives in the Siberian area. Okay, I'm getting more nervous because I know it's getting harder and harder. Man. Oh, I think this is New Zealand.
Yeah.
I can barely make out the shape of New Zealand. I actually don't know even how I got that one. So there's a lot of emptiness over here. See, we have to keep in mind that strategy doesn't always work like the tundra strategy because this doesn't count for like islands. I can't make out like a coastline or anything. Okay, well, the vast majority are compacted there. Is this China? I feel like no, because we'd see like I think Beijing would be more this way. I don't know. Please don't tell me it's like a bunch of islands. It's not Indonesia, but don't tell me it's like Micronesia. That wouldn't even be fair. It's not South Korea. I really don't know. I guess I'll just throw out China. Holy crap, that was a complete guess. I was wrong about Beijing. Okay, well, I'll take it. We talked about it earlier. This is definitely Egypt. And there we go. There it is. I think it kind of helps that I looked at that population.
Bro, I suck at
really
this.
Certain I won't be getting this one. This looks like an icy tundra. Is it Greenland? I don't even know what goes on in Greenland. It's Iceland. Close enough. I don't think anyone knows what goes on in Greenland because all the no data maps. Here we go. That's Indonesia. Is this Cyprus? Is it kind of sideways? I don't even know. Did I even confirm that was Indonesia? Malta. I wasn't gonna get that. Okay, because we're on like one of the last ones. This is gonna be like an evil one. This is like French Polynesia or Micronesia. I think the first one. Oh no, that was Panama. Okay, I just thought they were gonna give me an evil island one. Like I was waiting for that. That was a surprisingly fun game. I didn't think I was gonna be able to do that good on it. You kind of need the box. That box is really important to show you where like the emptiness is. Now that game would have been obviously a whole lot different, just like the world would be a whole lot different if Germany won World War I. Here was their plan for Africa after that. Now it's really important to keep in mind what Germany had before World War I, before they basically lost all this. Germany looked more like this during WW1, but also their overseas territories, well, they just had those. They were forced to lose all that after they lost the Great War. So a bunch of islands in the Pacific, this part of New Guinea, as well as a port in China. But in the case of this map, there were 4 spots in Africa that Germany already controlled. So obviously if they won World War I, they wouldn't have lost that territory. And well, basically this is an explanation for the massive German Africa here. They kind of just wanted to connect all of their territories in the heart of Africa, as well as, interestingly, they wanted Morocco and Tunisia. I'm not really sure why that is. Of course, the Ottomans were a German ally during the Great War, so I guess they're getting a little bit out of this. Obviously not as much as Germany, but this was Germany's plan after all. Germany's plan is not going to be to make the Ottomans massive. Why would they do that? Interestingly, they still allow Britain and France to have some of this stuff, unlike what Britain and France did to Germany on the other side of things, where they just took away all German colonies. On that very same note, here was France's plan for Europe after World War I. Now, of course, France was on the winning side during World War I, but this is just considering them, no other allies, the British or Americans, are not being thought about here. Also, this was very early into World War I. So their plan, of course, was just to completely break up Germany. France taking a massive L was really the beginning of the German Empire in 1871, so they thought, well, it's time to just finish that whole thing. Of course, the Russian Empire was an ally to the Entente and France, so They were going to get a huge chunk out of this. Basically, what happened to Austria-Hungary in our timeline was the idea for Germany as well. They just went with a probably more logical argument. If it happens to Austria-Hungary, it should happen to Germany as well. Of course, the same thing happens to the Ottomans. I mean, they all wanted to do this to the Ottomans afterwards. They almost did do this. This is such a fascinating map because, and I'm assuming this is why this map got so popular, if the world did go with France's plan here in 1915, there probably wouldn't have been a World War II. You always hear people say World War II started because they blamed everything on Germany, but they didn't get the ultimate punishment. Like, yeah, they did put a lot of blame on Germany, at least economically, but at the end of the day, they did allow them to stay together, which obviously the same can't be said for Austria-Hungary. So technically, Germany didn't get all the blame because they should have also been divided, and that would have stopped World War II more than likely, is my opinion. I mean, you can't really have an ultra-powerful Germany when Germany literally doesn't exist. You know that, what's that called? The butterfly effect? No, it's not the butterfly effect, but basically, if you go back in time and try to change something, it doesn't end up changing the results. This clearly looks like Russia would become a massive, massive problem. Like, dang, France just gave Russia so much. I think there probably still would be a World War II, but it would be in a completely different way because this Russian Empire, something bad's gonna happen. Naming customs around the world. So if you didn't know, a lot of the world doesn't necessarily go with first name and last name, at least the way we do in the US. Your first name being your given name and your last name being your family name. Now the US, Canada, and most of Europe do it like that, but in pretty much all of the Spanish-speaking world, it's your given name, your paternal name, and then a maternal name. So from Antonio Hernandez Vargas and Maria Rodriguez Lopez, that turns into just Jose Hernandez Rodriguez, the father's surname first. That's the Spanish way, but Portugal also has a different method. Basically, Portugal and Brazil does something similar, except it's the mom's last name first. I'm noticing some language themes in the Slavic world. It's your given name, your father's name, and then your last name. In a lot of the Arab world, not all, it's given name, father's name, grandfather's name, then family name. In all the blue, which I find the blue being really interesting since it goes all the way to India, it's your paternal name first and then your given name, which actually that custom stretches all the way technically to Europe as well. Now all the countries in purple only practice just one given name, which I think is an interesting idea, although it'd be very hard to distinguish who is who in the classroom. You got 3 Johns, you just have to like go off of attributes. Let's see what Dumber John got for this question. The world in 2100, or predicting global population. Now we have different organizations that predict different numbers.
Population going
we're at
down.
like what, 8 billion, something like that. But you know what's fascinating about this number here? We don't actually know that for sure. That's a guess. Isn't that kind of creepy? We could be off by a couple 100,000 more or less. I mean, I guess it shouldn't be surprising we cannot keep exact count over the entire Earth's population, but I just always assumed like that number was pretty much correct. A lot of places around the world, we don't for sure really know. I mean, China and India alone, how do you even keep up? They already have 1 billion people. So in certain estimates, in extremely low fertility scenarios, we're actually going to dip in population. That is by the time we get to 2100. And every time I look this stuff up, it does seem like a lot of these analysts are very surprised at how fast countries are developing and then lowering their fertility rate. I mean, for instance, China. This is a pretty extreme scenario. It's much more likely it'll be somewhere in the middle, around 10 billion by the time we hit the year 2100. But all of these projections say that we reach it somewhere in the second half of the 2000s, and then by 2100 we're going to dip down. Now this is an ultra crazy scenario if fertility just remains the same, which it's not. It's not going to remain the same worldwide, but that would be the only way to hit 15 billion people. People did not predict that fertility rates were just going to decline like this. Where do Americans live in the UK? Surprisingly, they're not all just hubbed around London. They seem to like the outskirts of places. Not very many Americans living in Wales, that's for sure. Practically none in Cornwall. It's going to sound strange. I've been to London twice now. I'm always so surprised at how few Americans I actually see or hear. All I have to do is hear the accent, but I feel like I don't ever come across them. I don't know why. I thought like at least I'd run into a couple. 6% of the population out of West Suffolk are U.S. citizens. I guess I need to go there to see the Americans. Not that I want to anyways, and if I'm in London, you know. This is very likely due to the amount of U.S. Air Force bases in the UK. 3 of them are clustered right here. A relief map of the insane geography from the Nordic countries. You start with Denmark, which is relatively flat. You move go up to Sweden and see why most of the Swedish population lives in the south. Kind of hard to live here. You can also see why most of Norwegians live along the coast. Again, hard to live in giant mountains, or at least for a lot of people. And then finally, there's Finland. Big frozen Finland. I feel like the only thing is this doesn't really show just how many lakes both Sweden and Finland have. Both of these countries are kind of just made up of really tiny lakes everywhere. It's actually really surprising just when you zoom in and notice. How many new cars in Europe are electric? Speaking of the Nordics, Norway and Iceland are purchasing electric cars at 50%. 50% of all new cars are electric from here. In Sweden, the rate is pretty high as well. It's at
crazy.
40. 30% for Denmark, and then Finland. And then funny enough, the percentage drops lower and lower the more south you go. So in the yellow countries, it's somewhere between 20 and 30%. And in the orange for France and the UK, it's somewhere between 10 and 20%. Southern Europe and a lot of the Balkans, especially Eastern Europe, are, yeah, they don't really want to get behind this, I guess. Maybe not want, but it's just more difficult. Really interesting to see Belgium so low when they're surrounded by countries that are adopting it faster. I do know the most popular car in Norway is Tesla. And big thanks to the patrons. Drew, I'm your dad, back with the milk. Look outside. John, Denver, Luxembourg lover. I can't sleep without Drew's voice. Aaron, Amateur Archaeology, Carmel, Norwal, Frederick, Tiblin, Good Ol' Ryan, Inquisitor, Jack Train's annoying friend, Lemino, is 10, Best Ride, The Power. You hear this, I love you. And why am I doing this?
Why is that so long, man? Thanks for watching this reaction video.